I'm Jason with Born Handy, and this is part 3 of my do-it-yourself hutch build. Now I'm using my hutches to help to store some gear for an aquarium, but I could easily see these going great in a dining room or any number of applications where you just need a little extra storage. Now in the previous video, we went ahead and roughed in the box that was going to become the lower cabinet, as well as the rough shelf components. And in this video, we're going to add the face frames, and the face frames perform a pretty... And the face frames perform a pretty vital function in hiding the edging of the plywood, as well as adding a significant amount of strength to both components. In addition to that, they add to the overall look of the cabinet as a piece. We're also going to get a head start on some of the details that take these pieces from hobby grade to something that looks like they might have been made by a professional, such as this beaded detail on the tabletop, as well as we're going to get started on the crown molding for the shelf components. So with the basic overview out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So continuing on with the build of the base cabinet, we are going to move on to the face frame material. So we're going to go back to the material that we've been using all along, the 2-inch wide by 7/8 thick maple, and we're going to cut 2 vertical face frame pieces for this first, and then we're going to add a horizontal piece here and a horizontal piece here. Certainly there's no shortage of ways to measure for doing this kind of work, but one of my preferences has always been to simply place the piece where I want it and mark it with a pen. And that should give me the exact length I need every time. The quick test fit shows me we hit our mark exactly. While the piece is laying on its back, I'll add a little bit of glue along the plywood edge. Now I can stand the piece up, but I am working against the clock. I do have glue trying to run away with me. So I'll place the face frame on. Basically, I'm feeling to make sure that the face frame is flush with the edge of the cabinet. And once I'm satisfied with the alignment, I'll go ahead and shoot a brad. And then I'll take a rag and clean up any of the excess. And then I'll apply the same piece to the other side. And now I'll go ahead and cut for the piece that's going to run along the bottom. And I'll do the same thing in terms of measurement. I'm just going to slide the piece in to where it touches, place a mark, and cut it. I'm satisfied with that fit, so I'm going to lay the base cabinet on its back, and I'm going to drill a couple of pocket holes near the bottom. I'll be able to insert those here and here. A little bit of glue along this face, a little bit of glue on this face and this face, and we're ready to install. We're also going to go back to our pocket clamp in order to line these pieces up. Once clamped, I'll go ahead and screw both of these in as well. And that wraps up the face frame on the lower section. Now we're going to make one for the upper. So there is a temptation to put pocket holes in here and try to secure it to the top. And although I think that's probably not a bad idea, my pocket hole jig would leave those holes exposed. And so although standing up you probably would never notice those, but there is a possibility that sitting somewhere in the room and looking across at the piece, you may notice the bottoms of the pocket holes. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to do pocket holes on the edge and a bead of glue along the top and the sides. And that wraps up the face frame for the base cabinet. We're going to set this aside and do the same thing to the upper shelf unit. So now that I've cut 2 face frame pieces to length, I'm going to go ahead and apply a bead of glue. Okay, at this point I'm just feeling to make sure that the bottom is flush with the bottom of the face frame. If there's any margin of error, we want it to be at the top, because later on we're going to add some crown molding, and that'll hide any errors that we may have made up here, but these are going to be visible. Sometimes the best way to make sure that the pieces stay flush is to clamp it and just toenail the very edge to help ensure that you've ended up getting a bite that's going to hold until the glue sets up. And we have a very tight fit. So if you remember that piece that we glued up early on in the project, immediately after we made the tabletop, this is it. And you'll see the reason why we put this piece in afterwards. The truth is, this is completely optional, and you could just do another piece of face frame like this one. But with the radius detail that I intend to add, I think that I needed a little bit more thickness, and I think that it really finishes the piece off, especially since the piece is not going to have a door and the items inside are meant to be displayed. So now that I've got that trimmed into place, I'm going to go ahead and secure it, and I'm going to use pocket screws on this one because we are going to need a little bit of extra strength while I run the router across. With this being the top of the board, I have located the pocket screws a little farther up from the bottom than ordinary, and I've done that to allow for the archway to come through and there be no risk of the arch exposing a pocket hole. And now I want to go ahead and sand this just for a second. The sanding is ultimately to allow the router to have a smooth ride as I cut the radius. So let me get that out of the way real quick. You may be able to see some joints, but you definitely are not able to feel them. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and mark out for that radius, and I'm going to cut it. 3/4 of an inch from the inside of this frame on both sides. Next, I want to get a little bit of double-sided tape and apply it to the top. Now I'll place this template exactly on those marks and press it into the tape. These templates are available online. This particular one is not necessarily just for arches. This is actually a kit that goes with a larger set for making arched doorways and raised panel doors. But it works great for what I'm doing right now. Once I've put the mark in with a pen, I can remove. I'll go ahead and peel this bit of tape up. And I'm going to rough cut that with a jigsaw simply because I don't want the router to have to plow out too much of this in any given pass. And okay, so this is the one piece that I did not buy at my local hardware store, but this step is completely optional, and it is pretty easy to order stuff like this online. So this shouldn't be the reason that you are not able to complete a project like this. So now I have a router with a ball bearing at the top of the shank rather than the bottom. Typically you do see them more often at the bottom than you do the top, but these are out there, and I did buy this one at my local hardware store yesterday. This particular ball bearing is designed to ride against this template while the cutting bit actually plows out the wood and gives us a nice finish. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that now and show you how that works. And we get a beautiful cut that's as close to perfect as we can do in a home shop. So at this point I want to add a decorative edge, and this of course is also one of those portions of this build that is completely optional. But I do want to point out a couple of tips that you're going to need to know if you're going to want to do this. So because we have mitered our corners here, if I were to run this router and pass it along this way as this blade is cutting in this direction, when it gets to this corner, the chances are that it'll actually blow out portions of this and ruin the piece. So rather than come along this way and tear into this piece from this angle, what I'm going to do is turn the bit on and come into the corner this way and move forward a few inches, and then do the same thing for every corner all the way around. I think at this point I want to add a little bit of a crown molding detail to the top of the shelf piece. That's going to be all for tonight because right now I've got a job that's actually paying money that's waiting and being held up by this project. So we're going to shelve this project for a few days until I finish the other job, and then we're going to get back and we're going to wrap this job up. So that's going to wrap up part 3 of my do-it-yourself hutch build. So be sure and give me a like and a subscribe if you're enjoying this content, because just like everybody else, I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel too. Also keep an eye out for part 4, where I'm pretty sure we're going to wrap this project up. So until next time, this is Jason with Born Handy.